The inspection was supposed to be humiliating. Grand Instructor Sirith Orvain had made a career of humiliation. 3 decades spent evaluating the youth divisions of the Galactic Compact's military academies had given the aging feline commander an eye sharp enough to find fault in a diamond and a tongue cutting enough to make seasoned soldiers weep. He had reduced Kreth warlords to silence. He had made Vord navigators question their entire lineage. He arrived at the Orvain Station Youth Compound on the 7th cycle of the 3rd moon, fully expecting to spend the morning reducing a batch of undisciplined cat cubs to emotional rubble. He was not expecting the human. Mara Ellison stood at the far end of the training yard, her back straight, arms crossed over her chest, watching the juvenile feline cadets run drills with an expression that could only be described as quietly satisfied. She was not tall by human standards, barely reaching the shoulder of the shortest adult feline present, but there was something in the way she occupied space that made her seem larger. Her dark hair was tied back in a practical knot. Her uniform was standard-issue compact caretaker gray, unremarkable in every technical sense. But her eyes tracked each cub with the focused attention of someone who had spent years learning exactly what each one was capable of. Grand Instructor Orvain descended from his transport and immediately found the sight in front of him wrong in ways he could not immediately articulate. The cubs were in formation. Not approximately in formation. Not in the rough clustering that passed for organization in youth divisions across 17 star systems. In formation. Shoulders squared, spines aligned, eyes forward, feet at precisely the correct width. 32 juvenile feline cadets between the ages of 6 and 11 cycles, each one motionless as carved stone. At their head stood Kale Vera. Kale was 11, broad for his age, with the thick striped gray coat of a Northern Highland bloodline and eyes the color of winter ice. He had arrived at the compound 14 months ago as what the intake documentation diplomatically called a discipline challenge. His first week had involved 3 altercations, 1 escape attempt, and an incident with the cafeteria's temperature regulation system that no one had fully explained. He had been flagged by 2 previous instructors as unmanageable. He was currently standing so still that a training drone flew directly past his ear and he did not so much as twitch a whisker. Grand Instructor Orvain clasped his hands behind his back and walked the length of the formation slowly, looking for something wrong. He found nothing. Not a misaligned elbow. Not a tilted chin. Not a single tail flicker of nerves, which in juvenile felines was essentially involuntary under stress. Suppressing it required either years of disciplined training or a truly extraordinary act of personal will. 32 tails. Motionless. He stopped at Kale Vera and looked the cub over with the practiced thoroughness of a professional whose reputation rested on finding fault. Name, he said. Kale Vera, sir. Flat. Certain. Neither defiant nor nervous. The voice of someone who had made peace with the fact that he was being evaluated and had simply decided to be evaluated well. Unit designation. Orvain Station Youth Cohort 7, sir. Caretaker Ellison's section. Orvain let the silence sit for a moment, then turned and walked back toward the center of the yard. He stopped in front of Mara Ellison, who had not moved. Caretaker, he said. Grand Instructor, she replied. How long have you been with this cohort? 14 months, sir. Orvain looked back at the formation. Something was still wrong, not with the cadets, but with his own understanding of what he was seeing. Youth cohorts were supervised positions. Caretakers managed schedules, handled logistics, broke up fights, made sure everyone ate and slept. They were not military trainers. They were not supposed to produce results like this. Who ran their discipline conditioning? He asked. I worked with them, sir. You. He turned back to her. A caretaker. That's correct. You are not certified in compact youth military conditioning. No, sir. She met his eyes with the same calm steadiness that Kale Vera had shown. I'm certified in child development, behavioral psychology, and conflict resolution. Human certifications, primarily. I adapted some of what I knew. Orvain was quiet for a moment. What did you adapt, he said, and it came out less like a question than a statement of genuine bafflement. Mara Ellison uncrossed her arms. She had been waiting for this question, he realized. Not with arrogance, she had the look of someone who had rehearsed an explanation not because they wanted to show off but because they had spent a long time trying to figure out how to make something clear. I stopped correcting mistakes, she said. Every previous system I reviewed for this cohort was built around punishment. A cub made an error, the error was noted and penalized. What that teaches is fear of error, not prevention of error. And felines, particularly young felines, respond very badly to fear-based conditioning. Their stress response degrades performance rather than motivating improvement. They shut down, or they lash out. Orvain said nothing. So I changed the framing entirely, she continued. I started recognizing what they did right. Not generic praise, specific acknowledgement. Vera, your stance correction in the third drill was exact. That kind of language. I built consequence structures that were logical rather than punitive. If a cub disrupted a drill, the consequence was running the drill again until they understood it, not isolation or demerit marks. She paused briefly, I started asking them questions. Questions. About what the discipline was for. Felines are not naturally inclined toward obedience for its own sake. I learned that early. They need to understand why a rule exists before they can commit to it. So I explained. Every protocol, every formation standard, every expectation, I explained the reasoning. Once they understood that the formation drills were about protecting each other's positions in an actual crisis scenario, once they understood that stillness under inspection was about controlling the body's fear response so it couldn't compromise their judgment in real danger, she nodded toward the formation, they stopped resisting it. They started competing to master it. Orvain turned and looked at Kale Vera again. The cub was still perfectly motionless. 14 months ago, that cub had been deemed unmanageable by 2 certified compact military instructors with combined experience of 50 years. A human woman with child development credentials and what appeared to be an unreasonably thorough approach to explaining herself had turned him into a cadet Orvain could not find fault with. He walked back to Kale Vera and stopped directly in front of him. At ease, he said. Kale Vera shifted to a precise rest position. Still controlled. Why do you follow her instructions? Orvain asked. The question was meant to catch him off guard. It didn't. Because she's right, sir, Kale said. Simple. Immediate. No hesitation, no performance of loyalty, just the clean factual statement of a cub who had thought about it and arrived at a conclusion. Every time she told me something was going to matter later, it mattered later. She doesn't make rules to have rules. When she says do something, it works. Orvain looked at him for a long moment. And the others follow your lead because? Because I told them what she told me. A flicker of something that was almost pride moved through the cub's ice-colored eyes. They saw it work for me. Then they wanted it to work for them. Orvain stepped back. He turned to survey the formation one final time. 32 cadets. 6 to 11 years of age. A behavioral record across this cohort that, 14 months ago, had included more disciplinary flags than any other youth group in the station's history. Now standing in a formation that would pass muster at a senior academy inspection without a single correction. He turned to Mara Ellison. Your methodology, he said carefully, is not standard compact practice. No, sir. I will need a full written account of your protocols. She nodded. I can have it ready within 3 days. 1 day. She did not flinch. 1 day, then. He held her gaze for a moment, and then, to the visible astonishment of the 2 junior officers who had accompanied him and who had watched him operate for years without ever witnessing anything like it, Grand Instructor Sirith Orvain gave a short, deliberate nod. Nod of politeness. Of acknowledgement. See to it, Caretaker Ellison, he said. He walked back to his transport without another word. Behind him, after the sound of the engine faded, Mara finally let out a slow breath. She turned to find Kale Vera watching her from the edge of the formation, the rest of the cohort behind him in a restless, waiting cluster, the stillness finally broken now that the pressure had passed. Well? Kale asked. Mara looked at him. Then she smiled, a small, genuine, with the specific satisfaction of someone who had bet on something for a long time and finally seen it pay out. You did well, she said. All of you. Kale Vera stood a little straighter. So did the 28 cadets behind him.